7 things that don't make sense after 70. Have you ever looked around at how society expects people your age to behave and thought, this is absolutely ridiculous? Today, we're calling out 7 things that absolutely don't make sense after 70. Social expectations, personal habits, and cultural assumptions that you've probably been following without questioning, even though they serve no purpose in your actual life and may actually be preventing you from experiencing the deep satisfaction that these years can offer. I'm talking about those moments when you catch yourself following rules that made no sense at 30 and make even less sense now. Like apologizing for taking an extra moment to read a menu, or stressing about learning every new app that teenagers are obsessing over, or maintaining friendships that stopped bringing you joy sometime during the Clinton administration. You know, what I've discovered, after decades of observing human behavior, most of the rules we follow aren't based on wisdom, they're based on fear. Fear of judgment, fear of standing out, fear of disappointing people who, let's be honest, aren't living our lives, paying our bills, or lying awake at night worrying about our well-being. But here's the beautiful, liberating truth about reaching 70. You've accumulated something more valuable than money, more powerful than status, and more liberating than youth: authentic wisdom. Not the kind of wisdom you read in self-help books or hear in motivational speeches, but the deep, bone-level understanding that only comes from living through real challenges, making real mistakes, surviving real losses, and discovering what actually sustains the human spirit versus what we're told should sustain it. You've watched trends come and go. You've seen revolutionary ideas that weren't so revolutionary after all. You've witnessed how what seemed absolutely crucial at 30 became completely irrelevant at 50. You've observed marriages that looked perfect from the outside crumble behind closed doors, while others that seemed unlikely have lasted decades. You've seen successful people who were miserable and struggling people who radiated contentment. You've learned that most of what the world calls important is actually just noise. If you're someone who believes that hard-earned wisdom should be shared, that authentic living matters more than social conformity, and that your 70s can be your most liberated and purposeful decade yet, hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community of people who refuse to waste their precious remaining time on nonsense, who understand that every day is a gift not to be squandered on other people's arbitrary expectations. Before we dive into these 7 things, let me share something profound I've learned. There's a difference between wisdom and intelligence, between knowledge and understanding, between following rules and living purposefully. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But here's what I've discovered after watching people navigate their 70s and beyond. The over-examined life isn't worth living either. There comes a point, and 70 is certainly that point, where you stop analyzing every choice to death and start trusting the wisdom you've accumulated through decades of actual lived experience. You've already conducted the great experiment of human existence. You've tested theories about happiness, success, relationships, and meaning. You've discovered which advice was solid and which was complete nonsense. You've learned which values actually sustain you through difficult times and which ones collapse under pressure. You've figured out what kind of people nourish your soul and what drain your energy. This isn't about becoming selfish or inconsiderate. It's about finally honoring the laboratory of your own life. You've gathered enough data. You've run enough trials. You've observed enough outcomes. The research phase is over. Now it's time for what I call wisdom-based living. Making choices based on what you've learned actually works for you, not what others think should work. Oscar Wilde understood this when he wrote, "Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions, their lives a mimicry, their passions a quotation." After 70, continuing to live by other people's arbitrary rules isn't wisdom. It's an unconscious habit that's outlived its usefulness, like keeping a coat that no longer fits or maintaining a tradition that no longer brings joy. The Roman philosopher Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal that became Meditations, captured this beautifully. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. At 70, you've earned the right to focus on your own path, rather than constantly checking if you're walking in step with everyone else.
Number 1. Apologizing for existing. The first thing that makes absolutely zero sense after 70, apologizing for taking up space in the world you've been contributing to for 7 decades. Last week, I witnessed something that broke my heart and opened my eyes simultaneously. I watched my 72-year-old friend Margaret apologize profusely to a grocery clerk for taking too long to organize her reusable bags. She said sorry 3 times in 30 seconds. Sorry for needing a moment to arrange her purchases, sorry for asking about the store's recycling program, sorry for counting out exact change. This is the same woman who managed a household budget through multiple recessions, raised 3 children who became productive citizens, volunteered at the local hospital for 15 years, and survived a global pandemic with grace and resilience. Yet there she was, treating her existence like an inconvenience to a teenager who was probably thinking about their weekend plans while scanning groceries. Margaret wasn't apologizing for doing anything wrong. She was apologizing for having needs, for taking time, for existing as a human being with a human being's natural requirements. She was apologizing for being 72 years old in a world that often treats aging as an imposition rather than an achievement. You've been contributing to this world for 7 decades. Think about that for a moment. 7 decades of paying taxes that built roads, funded schools, supported communities. 7 decades of raising children, caring for parents, showing up for friends. 7 decades of working jobs, volunteering time, solving problems, both large and small. 7 decades of being part of the great human project of civilization. Your presence anywhere isn't charity that others are providing, it's participation you've more than earned. When you need to read a menu in better lighting, you're not being difficult, you're acknowledging that your eyes have served you faithfully for 70 years and deserve consideration. When you ask a store clerk to explain product differences, you're not being demanding, you're being a thoughtful consumer who's learned that good decisions require good information. The French existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre wrote about being for others, the tendency to define ourselves through other people's perceptions rather than our own authentic experience. But at 70, you've lived long enough to understand that other people's perceptions are often based on their own fears, insecurities, and limited understanding. Why would you apologize to accommodate someone else's impatience when you've earned every moment of consideration you receive? When you stop apologizing for existing, you start living authentically. And authentic living, living in alignment with your true self rather than others' expectations, is the only kind that actually satisfies the human soul.
Number 2, technology anxiety. It's easy to feel left behind these days, like you're somehow inadequate just because you haven't mastered every new piece of technology that shows up overnight. My neighbor Carol spent 4 weeks anxious about learning Instagram stories. 4 weeks! She lost sleep over an app feature that makes pictures disappear after 24 hours. This is the same woman who can navigate the labyrinthine world of Medicare supplements, manage complex family dynamics across 3 generations, coordinate care for an elderly parent, and solve problems that would send most people half her age into therapy. But somehow, she'd internalized the message that not understanding how to add sparkles to a photo of her coffee cup meant she was falling behind or getting old. The irony is breathtaking when you think about it. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds." Just because technology exists doesn't mean you need to master it. You managed brilliantly for decades without knowing which filter makes your face look younger or how to make videos of yourself dancing to songs you don't even like. So, you've mastered technologies that would astound previous generations. You learned to drive cars when they were far more complex and dangerous than today. You figured out how to use computers when they came with thick manuals and no intuitive interfaces. You adapted to email, online banking, digital cameras, GPS navigation, streaming services, and countless other innovations. But more importantly, you mastered the ultimate technology, human relationships. You figured out how to communicate across generational divides, how to resolve conflicts, how to provide comfort in times of loss, how to celebrate in times of joy. You learned the complex algorithms of marriage, parenting, friendship, and community building. These require infinitely more sophistication than knowing which button makes your TikTok video go viral. The ancient Greek concept of techne originally meant skill or craft, not gadgets, but mastery of what matters. You've spent 70 years developing mastery in the areas that actually count: love, resilience, wisdom, compassion, problem solving. That's the real technology of human flourishing. Here's what I've observed about the people who are happiest in their 70s and beyond. They use technology selectively as a tool rather than a master. Some technology genuinely improves their lives. Video calling grandchildren who live far away, accessing information quickly, managing finances efficiently, streaming movies they actually want to watch. The rest, they recognize it for what it is: entertainment that's been marketed as necessity. Social media platforms are designed by teams of neuroscientists and behavioral economists to be addictive. They're literally engineered to hijack your attention and keep you scrolling. The fact that you're not drawn into this trap isn't a sign that you're behind, it's a sign that you have wisdom. While others are mindlessly consuming digital junk food, you're having real conversations, reading actual books, enjoying present moments without feeling compelled to document them for strangers' approval. The relief when you realize that being behind on technology often means being ahead on life is incredible. You've learned something that younger generations are still struggling with: the difference between being connected to devices and being connected to what matters. Steve Jobs, the man who revolutionized personal technology, was known for limiting his own children's screen time and encouraging them to read books and play outside. Even he understood that technology should serve human flourishing, not replace it. You don't need to understand cryptocurrency, TikTok trends, or whatever new platform launches next week. You need to understand yourself, your values, your relationships, and how to live meaningfully within the time you have. Those skills never become obsolete.
Number 3. Toxic relationships that won't die. The third thing that makes absolutely no sense after 70. Maintaining relationships that stopped nourishing your soul years or even decades ago. You know exactly who I'm talking about. That friend who calls every week, but somehow every conversation becomes about her problems. The same problems she never takes action to solve. The relative who criticizes every choice you make while sharing none of the responsibility for the consequences.
The acquaintance who leaves you feeling drained, criticized, or somehow smaller after every interaction. Maybe it's the friend who's been complaining about the same marriage for 20 years, but gets angry when you suggest counseling or change. Maybe it's the family member who brings up old grievances at every gathering, keeping wounds fresh that should have healed decades ago. Maybe it's the neighbor who drops by unannounced to gossip about other neighbors, leaving you feeling contaminated by the negativity. You maintain these relationships out of what you call loyalty. But let me share something Maya Angelou taught us. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. If someone has been showing you for years that they're committed to misery, drama, or negativity, continuing to engage isn't loyalty, it's enabling. And worse, it's a betrayal of yourself and the peace you've earned. My friend Sarah had been friends with Linda for 25 years. Their weekly coffee dates had evolved into complaint sessions where Linda criticized everything: Sarah's retirement choices, their mutual friends, the weather, the government, the younger generation, the state of the world. Nothing was ever right in Linda's universe, and she seemed to take pride in her pessimism as if it proved her superior intelligence. Sarah kept showing up out of the sense of obligation she called loyalty. She'd drive home from these meetings feeling exhausted, frustrated, and somehow tainted by the negativity. Her husband noticed she was grumpier on Linda days. Her grandchildren learned to avoid calling on Wednesday afternoons because Grandma was always tired after her coffee date. One day, Sarah realized something profound. Loyalty to someone who consistently makes you feel terrible is actually betrayal of yourself. It's betrayal of your own well-being, your family who deserves the best version of you, and your responsibility to use your remaining time wisely. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught us that we become like the people we spend time with. He wrote, "Show me who your friends are, and I'll show you who you are becoming." At 70, you have the wisdom to recognize whether your relationships are helping you become the person you want to be or pulling you towards someone you don't want to become. This doesn't mean abandoning people during temporary difficult times. True friendship involves showing up when friends face genuine challenges, illness, loss, major life transitions. But there's a difference between someone going through a hard time and someone who's made negativity their permanent residence. Some relationships have natural expiration dates, and pretending otherwise doesn't honor the good times you shared, it diminishes them. The college roommate who was perfect for that stage of life, the work colleague who was great for that era, the neighbor who was wonderful when your children were young, these relationships served their purpose. Trying to force them into your current life when they no longer fit is like trying to wear clothes from 30 years ago. It's uncomfortable for everyone involved. Friendship isn't a marriage contract or a legal obligation. It's a mutual exchange of energy, support, joy, and companionship. When that exchange becomes one-sided, when you're consistently giving more than you receive, or when interactions leave you feeling worse rather than better, it's time to reevaluate. At 70, your energy is finite and precious. Why spend it on relationships that drain rather than sustain you? Why give your limited emotional resources to people who don't appreciate or reciprocate them? There's profound wisdom in recognizing that saying no to what doesn't serve you creates space for what does. The hardest part is often the guilt. But we've been friends for so long. But she doesn't have many other friends. But family is family. These are all versions of the sunk cost fallacy, continuing to invest in something because you've already invested so much, even when it's clearly not working. The truth is, maintaining toxic relationships doesn't help anyone, including the toxic person.
By continuing to enable their negativity or drama, you're actually preventing them from experiencing the natural consequences of their behavior, consequences that might motivate them to change. Some relationships are meant for specific seasons of life. When the season changes, it's not cruel to acknowledge that reality, it's honest. And at 70, you've earned the right to prioritize honesty over obligation, authenticity over appearance, and your own well-being over others' expectations.
Number 4. Fashion police and their arbitrary rules. There comes a time in life when it's worth questioning who gets to decide what's appropriate. Why should anyone, especially someone who hasn't walked a mile in your 70-year-old shoes, dictate what you wear, how you look, or what feels beautiful on your body? Fashion isn't just about style. It's a form of self-expression. And by this stage in life, you've earned the right to express yourself however you please, boldly, comfortably, joyfully, without needing anyone's approval. You can't wear white shoes after Labor Day. Really? Says who? The fashion police? I'd love to meet the person who decided that my September footwear choices have any impact on global peace, economic stability, or the well-being of my community. I'd love to understand the logic behind why certain colors become inappropriate based on calendar dates, as if the Earth's rotation around the sun somehow affects the aesthetic value of specific hues. Coco Chanel, who revolutionized women's fashion by freeing them from corsets and introducing comfort and practicality, said, "Fashion fades, but style is eternal." She understood something profound. True style isn't about following rules, it's about understanding yourself so completely that your choices reflect your authentic self rather than others' expectations. Fashion rules are primarily marketing tools designed to sell magazines, create insecurity, and convince people they need to constantly buy new things to remain appropriate or current. They're economic strategies, not wisdom traditions. They're based on the assumption that someone else knows better than you do what makes you feel confident, comfortable, and authentically yourself. But think about what you've learned in 70 years of living in your body. You know which colors make your eyes sparkle and which make you look tired. You understand which fabrics feel comfortable against your skin and which cause irritation. You've discovered which styles make you feel confident and which make you feel like you're wearing a costume. You've learned which shoes allow you to walk with comfort and dignity and which leave you hobbling. This knowledge isn't trivial. It's deeply personal wisdom that no fashion magazine or style guru could possibly possess. You've conducted a 70-year experiment in what works for your unique body, your specific lifestyle, your particular preferences. Why would you abandon that hard-earned knowledge to follow rules created by people who know nothing about your life? The deeper issue is about authority and autonomy. Who gets to decide what's appropriate for you? Who has the right to determine what makes you look good or bad? The implicit assumption behind fashion rules is that someone else's opinion about your appearance matters more than your own comfort, confidence, and joy. But why should that be true? At 70, you've earned the right to dress for your own satisfaction rather than others' approval. Some days you might feel like wearing yoga pants to the grocery store because comfort is your priority. Other days, you might choose to dress elegantly for the pure pleasure of feeling beautiful. Both choices are perfect because they're yours, made by someone who understands her own needs and preferences. The French have a concept called joie de vivre, the joy of living. It's about finding delight in simple pleasures, including the pleasure of dressing in ways that make you feel good. When you wear colors that make you happy, styles that make you feel confident, and clothes that allow you to move comfortably through your day, you're practicing joie de vivre. You're choosing joy over compliance, authenticity over conformity. I think about the women I know who are most radiant in their 70s and beyond. They're not following fashion rules, they've developed personal style. They wear what makes them feel like themselves, regardless of whether it's age-appropriate according to some arbitrary standard. They understand that true elegance comes from confidence, not compliance. Wear what makes you feel good. Choose colors that bring you joy. Select fabrics that feel comfortable. Pick styles that reflect who you are rather than who others think you should be. The people whose opinions matter will celebrate your authenticity. The people whose opinions don't matter, well, their opinions don't matter. The ultimate fashion rule for people over 70 should be this: if it makes you feel confident, comfortable, and authentically yourself, it's perfect. Everything else is just noise from people who haven't earned the right to have opinions about your choices.
Number 5. Other people's drama as entertainment. I know intelligent, accomplished women who can tell you everything about which celebrities are feuding, divorcing, or making poor life choices, but they can't remember the last meaningful conversation they had with their actual neighbors. They know intimate details about the manufactured problems of people they'll never meet, while the real human beings in their immediate circle, people who actually care about their well-being, remain mysterious to them. This isn't just harmless entertainment, it's a misallocation of the most valuable resource you have, your attention. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal nearly 2,000 years ago, understood this principle. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. But I'd take it further than Marcus Aurelius. The problem isn't just paying attention to what your neighbor does, it's paying attention to the manufactured drama of people who aren't even your neighbors, who don't know you exist, and whose problems are often created by publicity teams to generate exactly the kind of attention you're giving them. Celebrity obsession is what I call mental junk food. It feels like you're consuming something substantial. After all, you're learning information, following storylines, forming opinions. But you're actually just filling valuable brain space with other people's marketing campaigns. You're using your intellectual and emotional capacity to engage with content that's designed to distract you from your own life rather than enhance it. Think about what happens when you follow celebrity drama. You develop opinions about people you don't know, based on information that's been filtered through multiple layers of publicity management, media interpretation, and profit motive. You invest emotional energy in outcomes that don't affect your life. You spend time discussing situations you can't influence with solutions you can't implement. Meanwhile, the people in your immediate circle, your family, friends, neighbors, community members, have real stories that would amaze you if you took the time to discover them. Your neighbor might have fascinating experiences from decades of work you know nothing about. Your friend might have overcome challenges that would make any celebrity's struggles look trivial. Your family members might have dreams, fears, and insights that could change how you see the world. The beautiful thing about real relationships is that they're reciprocal. When you invest attention in actual people, they invest attention back in you. When you show genuine interest in their lives, they show genuine interest in yours. When you support them through difficulties, they support you through difficulties. Celebrity obsession is a one-way relationship that gives nothing back except the illusion of connection.
Number 6. Over-explaining your choices. Have you ever found yourself explaining your personal decisions to someone who doesn't live your life, pay your bills, or carry your responsibilities? Why do we do this?
Someone asks about your weekend plans, and suddenly you find yourself delivering a comprehensive dissertation on your decision-making process, complete with justifications for why staying home with a good book is actually a valid choice. Well, I was thinking about going out, but, with my back acting up and the weather looking uncertain, and really I've been so busy lately that I thought maybe some quiet time would be good for me, although I know I should probably be more social. Stop. Just stop. Your retirement plans don't require a defense presentation to your former colleagues. Your living arrangements don't need approval from casual acquaintances who won't be helping with the rent. Your vacation choices, dining preferences, daily routines, and lifestyle decisions are yours to determine without consensus from people who aren't invested in your well-being or affected by the outcomes. "That works for me" is a complete sentence. "I prefer it this way" needs no additional explanation. "This is what I've decided" requires no supporting evidence. Most people aren't actually seeking detailed justifications when they ask about your choices. They're making conversation, satisfying mild curiosity, or sometimes, let's be honest, looking for material to judge or gossip about later. When you over-explain your choices, you're implicitly asking for permission or approval. You're treating your own decisions as if they're tentative proposals that require validation from others to become legitimate. But at 70, you've made thousands of decisions, lived with their consequences, learned from their outcomes, and developed judgment that's been tested by decades of real-world experience. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius understood this principle. In his personal journal, he wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." But he also understood something deeper, that constantly seeking others' approval is a form of mental slavery that prevents you from living authentically. Confident people, people who've learned to trust their own judgment, state their choices and move on. They don't apologize for reasonable decisions or seek validation from everyone they encounter. They understand that their choices don't require others' understanding or approval to be valid. This doesn't mean being rude or dismissive. It means being clear, honest, and comfortable with your own decisions. When someone asks about your plans, you can respond with genuine enthusiasm about what you've chosen, rather than defensive explanations about what you haven't chosen. "I'm looking forward to a quiet weekend with my books" is much more pleasant for everyone than a 5-minute justification for why you're not going to their party. The freedom that comes from this realization is extraordinary. You can make decisions based on what actually works for your life, your values, your circumstances, and your preferences, without constantly calculating how to frame those decisions for others' consumption. You can choose authenticity over approval, personal satisfaction over social acceptance. At 70, you've earned this freedom. You spent decades considering others' opinions, accommodating others' preferences, and managing others' reactions to your choices. You've paid your dues to social harmony. Now you can focus on what actually serves your life rather than what looks good to people who aren't living it.
Number 7. Decline mode instead of growth mode. The most ridiculous thing of all, and this one breaks my heart because it's so unnecessary and so destructive, is acting like your life is essentially over, like you're just marking time until death simply because you've reached 70. This mindset is not only factually wrong, it's actively harmful. Many people report their happiest, most fulfilling, most authentic years occurring after 70, when they finally have clarity about what matters, freedom from others' expectations, and the confidence to pursue what brings them genuine satisfaction rather than social approval. You might have fewer years ahead than behind, but that mathematical reality doesn't make your remaining years less valuable. If anything, understanding time's finite nature should inspire more intentional, meaningful living rather than resigned waiting for the end. When you know something is precious because it's limited, you treat it with greater care, not less. The Japanese have a concept called ikigai, your reason for being, your purpose for getting up in the morning. Research in Okinawa, one of the world's blue zones where people live longer and healthier lives than anywhere else, shows that people who maintain a sense of ikigai well into their 80s and 90s have better cognitive function, better physical health, and more life satisfaction than those who feel their purpose ended with retirement. At 70, you're not marking time until death. You're someone with 7 decades of accumulated wisdom about how to make time meaningful. That's not decline, that's expertise. You've learned what kinds of relationships actually nourish the human spirit and which ones are just social obligation. You've discovered what activities bring genuine satisfaction versus what you thought you were supposed to enjoy. You've figured out what values actually sustain you through difficult times and which ones collapse under pressure. This is invaluable knowledge that younger people are still struggling to acquire. You've already solved problems they're just encountering. You've already made mistakes they're about to make. You've already learned lessons they're still paying tuition to learn. That's not obsolescence, that's wisdom. The poet Jenny Joseph understood this when she wrote, "When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple, with a red hat that doesn't go and doesn't suit me." She understood that age brings the ultimate freedom, the right to please yourself first, to live according to your own values rather than others' expectations, to prioritize authenticity over approval. I think about the people I know who are thriving in their 70s, 80s, and beyond. They're not people who've given up or settled into decline mode. They're people who've embraced what I call wisdom-based living, making choices based on what they've learned actually works, rather than what they think they're supposed to do. At 70, you have something younger people desperately need: perspective. You've seen enough cycles to understand that most crises pass, most problems have solutions, and most fears are worse than their realities. You've witnessed enough change to know that adaptation is possible, that resilience can be developed, that meaning can be found even in difficult circumstances. This isn't about denying the realities of aging, physical changes, health challenges, losses that come with time. It's about refusing to let those realities define the entirety of your experience. It's about understanding that every stage of life has its own gifts, its own opportunities, its own possibilities for growth and contribution. Your 70s can be a time of liberation, authenticity, and deep satisfaction if you choose to approach them that way. The key word is choose. You get to decide whether aging is decline or evolution, ending or transformation, limitation or liberation.
Questioning these 7 nonsensical patterns isn't about becoming antisocial, rebellious, or inconsiderate toward others. It's about applying the wisdom you've gained through 7 decades of experience to create a life based on logic, authenticity, and personal values, rather than arbitrary expectations that may have never served you well in the first place. At 70, you've earned the right to live sensibly. You've paid enough dues, followed enough rules, accommodated enough other people's preferences, and managed enough other people's reactions to trust your own judgment about what makes sense for your remaining years. You've conducted the great experiment of human existence, and you've gathered enough data to draw some conclusions. Every habit you eliminate that doesn't serve you creates space for something that does. When you stop apologizing for existing, you can focus energy on contributing meaningfully. When you quit maintaining friendships that drain you, you have more to give to relationships that nourish you. When you stop following arbitrary fashion rules, you can discover your authentic personal style. When you stop consuming other people's drama, you can create meaningful moments in your own life. Now, you get to do better by living according to your own hard-earned wisdom rather than other people's outdated expectations. You get to create a life that makes sense to you, serves your authentic self, and honors the incredible journey that brought you to this point. This is your time for what I call wisdom-based living, making choices based on what you've learned actually works
rather than what you think you're supposed to do. It's your time for authenticity over approval, meaning over convention, and depth over breadth. Thank you for watching, and thank you for taking this journey with me through these 7 things that simply don't make sense after 70. If this exploration helped you identify some patterns worth rethinking in your own life, if it gave you permission to question assumptions you've been carrying for too long, or if it reminded you that your wisdom has value and your choices have validity, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell right now. We're building something special here, a community of people who believe that wisdom should guide decisions, not social pressure. A community that understands authenticity matters more than approval, and that your 70s can be your most liberated and purposeful decade yet. Subscribe if you're ready to question more assumptions, share more authentic perspectives, and live more intentionally. We'll keep having these honest conversations about living authentically, loving wisely, and aging with intention rather than resignation. Drop a comment below and tell us which of these 7 resonated most with your experience. Sometimes recognizing what doesn't make sense helps us see what does. And if you know someone who needs permission to live by their own truth rather than outdated rules, please share this video with them. Hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started on this journey of wisdom-based living, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue exploring what it means to live authentically at every stage of life. Because, in the end, it's not about following every rule. It's about following the right ones. And at 70, you finally have the wisdom to know the difference.